one policy project that I've worked on in the last year, so 2019, it's called Systems Mapping for Missions. And the context, very high level, is that the UK has an industrial strategy, which, just as a brief recap, is the government's white paper by which it sets the direction for where it wants to see industrial development go in the UK. And as part of the industrial strategy, there is a piece that talks about the missions. So it has outlined a set of 4 grand challenges, which basically are like signposts to things that we would like to work on together or work towards. And within those 4 grand challenges, there are 5 policy missions. So an example would be to decarbonize the UK's industrial clusters by the year 2030. So most of these are ports, coastal-based cities, like Newcastle. Another grand mission would be in the ongoing digital revolution. And when we look at the UK's healthcare system, where are the opportunities for those 2 worlds of change to connect and enhance each other? And so this industrial strategy sets out these missions, and they each have in them a time, a direction, sort of a sense of what is meant to be achieved, but that is it. There is no big grand recipe or plan. And so then the way it works is that you have within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, you have a team who are basically tasked with taking those missions and getting them delivered. And then for every single one of the missions, there's a specific delivery team, which has a mixture of analysts and policy strategists, which is really not unique, but that's really quite exciting. And they then work on their specific mission to get them delivered. So what the project for me became about is that kind of behind the scenes, not entirely visible, is that these missions are obviously enormously ambitious, bold. They cross multiple policy domains. And so for the individuals working on them, that is conceptually and practically a very, very difficult thing to scope, to come up with a detailed delivery plan for, and then implement it. And in a way to try and support the teams to do this super complex policy design and delivery exercise, take a mission, make it a real thing. The government chief scientist, government chief scientific advisor, basically recommended, look, let's look at the nature of these missions. We can see that they're super interrelated, complex pieces. They're systems, they're policy systems. So you will find it helpful and beneficial if you apply systems thinking in your process of making sense of how do I take a mission and how do I deliver it. The really practical question then becomes, so what do I do? I'm a policy official in BEIS or somewhere in government. I have a team. I want to do systems thinking, systems mapping. What does that look like? And now within government, the way it works is that when you, and really great in the UK, is that when we have questions about new types of methods or methodology, loads of different hubs of expertise, and one of these sits in Cabinet Office, Policy Lab. And Policy Lab are globally renowned for being super creative and innovative with using new methods to do policy design, policy delivery. And so the BEIS team went to Policy Lab and said, hey, do you know what systems mapping looks like? Can you help? And then in terms of how I got involved, this is quite typical, is that I have, in the last 3 years, in a relatively informal way, I have an interest in innovation with methods, so I have made sure that where there were events or where there were loose interpersonal connections, I have just, without an agenda, made myself visible and said hello to people there. And over time, and you can never guarantee these things, that then resulted, I think last January, in an invitation to just come do a quick show and tell. Half an hour of sitting around a table with almost like a brown bag lunch with some people who work within Policy Lab and showing them some of the things I've been up to that I thought might be interesting to them. And I think as an academic that's really interesting because there is no expectation for a return. And so that's a lot where our sort of invisible labor goes. We do these meetings, we go to share ideas, learn back, and it's unclear where the payoff, if that's even how we think of it, would come back. But in this case, something I said had stuck. Someone had remembered I'd talked about systems mapping, and that's where then the invitation came. A direct invitation to work with Policy Lab to support the Bayes team on working with 3 of the missions to make a systems map that would help them do that policy design to policy delivery piece. And really, overall, what I think it then became about is it's about more than just making those systems maps of the missions. It's about reflecting on what is the range of different types of practical needs here? Like, what do people actually need to get done that this process can support? So it's more than focusing on a product, it's focusing on helping a process of learning about how to do things using a particular tool, in this case, systems mapping. And so it started, so in terms of between the first invitation, it'll usually be several weeks to make sure that everybody's clear on what like the scope of work is. I think that there are many, UCL is a great place to do this kind of work because there's quite a lot of increasing maturity, both at departmental level, institutional level, about how to set those relationships up. And then once we started, really what it looks like behind the scenes is a series of internal and external workshops. They are meetings around roundtables where before the workshop, I'll work together with my partners and colleagues at Policy Lab or at Bayes to agree that we're clear on what the outcomes of those meetings are. I will propose a way for us to collaboratively work together and do some of the mapping, how we are going to take what was contributed, capture that, and then analyze it post-workshop. And so that kind of knowledge of knowing the data collection, data reduction, data management, analysis piece is a major contribution we make as academics to just sort of streamline that process. And then iteratively, probably in a series of somewhere close to 12 workshops over a 6-month period, these 3 different maps emerged. What we've done since with them is they've become digital tools. So there are 3 digital systems maps of 3 of the industrial strategy missions online. Each has a set of supporting documentations. And what we're really trying to work towards at the moment is keeping those open and live and accessible for anyone who wasn't already involved in the process or who wants to continue working with them. So that's sort of trying to take the ongoing trend towards open science and bringing them into a policy space where that might not have really been used before. So in terms of the types of impact it's had, it's really varied from each of those 3. So it's a sort of shared journey, but 3 distinct sub-projects with 3 of the different mission teams, because obviously each of them is going to have a different reality. They're going to have different senior stakeholders who have different types of questions that they need to respond to. And so very much my role on each project also has very much had to be through, you have to be quite flexible. So take a phone call whenever the opportunity comes for your partner to do that, to talk through what really in the short term and long term is a priority for us to be working on here. And examples of the types of impact had, one of the teams has very explicitly used the process in this, the map, the live map itself, to design its delivery plan. And in policy, usually you also have to make a monitoring and evaluation plan. And so you can directly in those final pieces of documentation see the whole logic chain traced back to the systems maps, which is amazing. Overall, all those 3 teams have recently actually gone to Germany, to Berlin, where the German government wants to do missions-oriented policy delivery, and so to learn from the teams how they use systems mapping to support them in that process. What will inevitably happen as you're doing any type of work is that new ideas will come up or new questions will come up. And so one of the teams basically had the realization that the types of metrics that were being used to describe to people what progress was being achieved, or like where are we in terms of decarbonizing heat supplies to buildings, for example, that the metric doesn't really fit with the picture we now have of the nature of process of change. And so that might be a spin-out project. You know, what is a new type of metric or tool that we can do? But yeah, like it is, even if the projects officially finish, The new labor or new type of work then for me has become finding a way to, in a light touch way, keep involved and to keep supporting the teams to make sure that all the effort invested or like time spent over those 6 months keeps being useful. So to not force it, but where useful to them, if they have any questions, to be available and to work through that with them, to talk about new ideas. And so I don't know where it will go. And that's sort of the level of comfort you have to find, is that I think also very important for me in the past, and that's really helped me on these projects, is to not feel like I own that. What I did, if I could support learning and learn from that and then share that with a wider community, and then to just be able to let go. I think that that is a really important practical and emotional lesson I've had in doing this kind of work, because it becomes invisible. You don't see anymore where the reports or the process or the briefs you've written, where they've gone. And so I don't know all of the impact, if any, now that the work has happened.